Today I'm talking to Annie Braendle.
Perfect.
Correct pronunciation? Good. I'm so pleased to see you today, Annie. I remember meeting you through Wellness Coaching Australia as a student, and now you're running your own coaching business and you're successful. So we'd love to hear all of your secrets on how to do it. But first, maybe you could tell us a bit about your background and how you got into coaching, if that's okay.
Yeah, so my background has always been operations management or revenue in the tourist industry, and I always just really liked working with the teams, training teams, working with people. And then I always had that interest in the health industry as well. So it just got to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to look into getting my certification and see what happens. And at the same time, I started mountain biking, and I was suddenly around a lot of people who kept injuring themselves, needed to work on their mindset to get back on their bike. And having done a lot of different sports previously, I've always sort of been in that coaching world around different athletes. So decided I want to learn more about it. Did my coaching certification with Wellness Coaching Australia. Then pretty much kept going with those clients that I had from the athlete space to get my national board qualification in the US. And yeah, then started working as a coach at the same time that sort of COVID hit. So I got out of the cruise industry and revenue industry I was working at that time, and pretty much, yeah, went in straight away in the deep end, started my own business, started working predominantly with, yeah, facing fears, mindset, athletes, sporty people, injuries. And then started working for a company called The Change Room for a while as a coach, where we were working with people on workers' compensation. So that sort of tied in with the working with injured people space. And then, eventually started looking into how can I do this work, but do it remotely? How can I work with a team or by myself? Like, what is the perfect way to work for me? These days, I work a couple of days a week in a clinic in Freshwater, where we work as a team of GPs, naturopath, and health coaches together. And the other 3 days a week, I sort of split between my own business, Spark Courage, and working for a digital platform called BetterUp.
Wow. And what's it like working in 3 different areas?
It's amazing. For me personally, I need it. I need variety. I get bored really easily, and having different types of clients. So within the clinic, it could be anything, like people from wanting to work on reversing type 2 diabetes or weight loss, to people who've been seen by a lot of doctors when it comes to any sort of illness or injury, and they finally found sort of a collaborative team that can work with them together to get their health back. With my own business, I still focus mainly on anything mindset related and athlete related. Also just finished a pain management coach certification, so I'm excited to sort of tie the chronic pain aspect into my own business.
Right. Yeah.
And with BetterUp, I can work pretty much from anywhere in the world with clients from anywhere in the world, which I absolutely love. I've got clients from Canada, the US, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Germany, like literally all over the place, and with all different sorts of issues, because it's called care coaching. So it literally could be anything from work-life balance to working on, anything that they deem their optimal health and well-being. So it does not get boring.
Wow. Well, I'm going to pretend that I'm a new graduate coach and think of all the questions that they would want to ask you.
Yep.
And maybe we could wind right back to the beginning. I know that when you did your certificate with WCA and you did Passion to Profit, and you were talking about working with athletes and mindset, what was the value proposition you took into that market to make them be attracted to wanting to work with you around coaching in the first place?
Back then, it was really sort of, working on like injury recovery, facing your fears, and getting back into competing. So it was a very, very, very small niche of people, which is in the end why I sort of started broadening it up, because working with those types of people is amazing. But if you've got an athlete who destroyed themselves in any type of sport and still wants to get back to competing, they've already got a very driven mindset. So it's quite easy to work with them. But sometimes they just need someone to, hold them accountable and just brainstorm ideas with. Whereas, like after doing that for about half a year, I'm like, you know what? I love it. But the market is too narrow to make a living off it.
Okay. So that they were easy to work with, and it sounds like because they were part of the way there, it was important to them to get back into training or sport.
Yeah.
So they were motivated to change, but maybe it wasn't as perhaps transformational, or perhaps there were other areas. So then you broadened into where did you go next?
Pretty much that's when I started with the change room. So one of the reasons why I wanted to work with them was because I had been working by myself during COVID for 6 months. I was pretty much isolated at home with no team to bounce ideas back and forth. But also, just sort of curious about how other coaches work, how other companies work, and what other types of coaching there are. So broadened into that sort of workers' compensation, injury, recovery, getting back to work space from there. And it was great because suddenly I had a full team of very amazing people to work with. And again, like a completely different type of clients that had the same issues that the people had that I was working with previously, or at the same time still, but came from a completely different direction. They weren't athletes who already they weren't somewhere in the change cycle where they were like, yes, I want to go and that's what I'm doing. They were more in the contemplative stage. Okay, is there something I can do? I do want to do something, but sometimes it's like, oh, you know what, my insurance has sent me there. I don't know what to expect. So it was pretty much like taking what I've done previously to people who've sort of like a 1 or 2 stages prior to being in the maintenance or action stage of the change.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? I see people that want to target people who don't know that they need help or aren't willing to change. And I think, gee, that's really hard. But I suppose the difference is in this context that they were kind of mandated clients in a way. They were going through insurance and they're getting, your fees are being paid by the insurance companies to help them do that readiness to change stage.
And it's a completely different set. It's more like you suddenly have to listen for the tiniest little bit of change talk in a person and then just grab them and go from there. So that was great. And then so after that I got stuck in Germany for a while during COVID and sort of couldn't come back. So that sort of again changed my perspective on work in terms of, okay, what can I do where I can work full-time remotely, which is how BetterUp started, which was great because I could do it from anywhere in the world and make a living of it at the same time. But then again, that got to a point where I'm like, no, I'm pretty much working from home by myself again. I want to go back and have those ideas with. And then the opportunity came to work in the clinic. So it was.
And what sort of clinic is it? Is it integrative medicine, wellness clinic? What is it?
So it's an integrative medicine or clinic. And I started off at the Central Coast in a clinic called Invitation to Health. They got bought out by Monty's group, who then opened another clinic in Freshwater, which is Freshwater Integrative Health Clinic. And literally it's a set of GPs, integrative GPs and regular GPs, naturopaths, nutritionists, and health coaches working together to see whatever can be done to get the best outcome for any of the patients. And again, they come with all different sorts of, I wouldn't say issues, but all different sorts of questions or things they would like to see resolved. Sometimes you only need a GP, sometimes you only need a naturopath. Sometimes they come out of a consultation with a treatment plan and go, okay, I know what I need to do, but I have no idea how to integrate that into my life. That's where I as a coach come in. So it's a very collaborative approach, and it seems to work really well.
And a lot of coaches think, oh, I need another qualification, but you're obviously working alongside other health professionals with those qualifications. Could you explain a little bit about the role of a coach who works alongside a GP or alongside a nutritionist?
Very similar to just the standard coaching ethics. Like in the end, we do have a lot of knowledge as coaches, but we don't give advice. We don't tell people what to do. We just work with them as, okay, they're the expert in their own life. They may have a treatment plan from a GP and a naturopath. They may not always agree 100% with what they've been told to do. Or if you've got someone who has, let's say, a background that is Italian and involves pasta 7 days a week, and suddenly they get told, you've got to go gluten-free for at least 4 weeks just to do certain tests or check out certain things. And they're like, I can't do that. I can't do that. And then as a coach, the role is to go, you know what? I think you can. Let's brainstorm ways on how you think you can try that. What is it that will make you do that? Even if we know it's probably not going to be forever or long term because you just love it too much, but there may be alternatives, or maybe there is a way to sort of get to the point where you can integrate it again. But right now, what can you do right now to give it a go? So it's more like working with a GP and a naturopath is more they get advice and they know what they're supposed to do. And then it's figuring out how that ties in with their values, their beliefs, how they can figure that out in their current life and with their current life. And if they're super busy, like, are there alternatives to cooking healthy? Like, literally little things. It's a lot more brainstorming, whereas outside of the clinic, it's more being in the typical coach role. Like, you let the clients explain what they want and then just really pull their strings and figure out what do they actually want, what motivates them, and what do they want to get out of coaching, and then help to get them there.
As you're speaking, I'm wondering if fear is a common thing that people are facing. You've talked a bit about the mindset coaching you did when you started out, and there's probably some common ground. Could you speak a little bit to that?
I think fear is different for everyone. Like, there's definitely a lot of anxiety, but in all different areas. So it's like imposter syndrome is one that comes up with a lot of clients, and at the same time, sort of a little fear of trying something new comes up with everyone.
Yeah.
And it's more than figuring out, okay, how can you get the confidence of that individual up to where it needs to be? Like, how can you reconfirm and pretty much let them tell you what they've achieved in life so far, and then confirm back to them, like, you know what, like, you've just told me so much that you've already done in your life, or even just in the last couple of weeks. Like, you're succeeding in so many areas of your life, but you're not even noticing. So really bringing that forward and helping them find the confidence to give it a go and to try something new.
Yeah, it's a great point, isn't it? I mean, I often teach that for someone to change, the importance has to be high, and we teach that in WCA. The confidence is less than 7 out of 10, but people that have a high confidence can do it themselves, right? They don't need a coach necessarily.
Yeah, 100%. But at the same time, I've seen people who are super confident and they know they can do it themselves, but they need that external accountability. They're super motivated and they consider it super important, but then they've just got that sort of, we've got a word in German for that. It's called Schweinehund. It's like your inner pig dog, which is the little voice inside you that just tells you, you know what, today just stay on the couch, or you know what, you've exercised really hard yesterday and it's on your list for today, but you could just go for a walk with your dog instead. So I've found with a lot of clients, like, depending on what type of personality they have, no matter how motivated they are and how important it is to them, some of them just really want to have that coach there just to check at the end of a fortnight going, have you actually done what you said you'd be doing? And they'll do it because they know they have to justify it. So one thing I've noticed is with a lot of the people I've worked with, they need that external motivation. Like, if they're intrinsically motivated and they just do what they tell themselves to do, they don't usually come back. They just need that little kick, and then they're like, okay, I've got that. I know what I need to do now, and then they just do it. So
I wonder if there are obliger personalities from the Gretchen Rubin model that need that accountability.
So I pretty much make almost all of my clients do that test.
Me too.
And I'd say obligers are definitely the largest group of my clients, but then questioners and rebels as well. I've had one upholder come in who never came back.
Yeah.
But obligers definitely make up the biggest group. And then rebels after that. And questioners, usually once they've figured out why they're doing what they're doing, they find a way to just do it themselves, and then just every now and then to see they're still on the right track.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Annie.
That's just my personal experience, because I just really see how all these personalities tie together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you decided to do your NBHWC qualification, just changing tack a little bit. What made you want to do that?
Part of it was just because I could, but also part of it was to just have that sort of formal recognition, because obviously coaching isn't regulated in most countries, especially health and wellness coaching. And it was sort of like, I was looking at ICF and I was looking at the NBC HWC, and decided for now health and wellness coaching is what I want to do. And then just decided to set myself that little challenge, because you needed a certain amount of clients before you could apply for the certification or to sit the exam. And I personally get very motivated by competitions. I'm like, okay, can I get those clients? Like, I applied for the exam, but then I had it in the back of my mind, like, I need to have that amount of clients by the time I'm sitting the exam, because otherwise I won't be able to sit it. So that was a lot of motivation for me. to just have that sort of pressure to make sure I'm working on my business and I'm acquiring clients and I'm holding sessions. The other thing was with coaching platforms in the US, such as BetterUp, you do need a coaching credential like the NBC, HWC, or ICF, depending on which path of coaching you do with them. So after I realized that, I was like, yep, I'm definitely getting that national board qualification. And without it, I wouldn't be working for BetterUp. So that turned.
So tell us how you got into working with BetterUp and how that evolved.
Completely random. Like there are a lot of like coaching groups on Facebook. And on one of the groups, for those who've set the national board exam, someone mentioned that BetterUp is hiring for care coaches. And I'm like, what is a care coach? And pretty much it's a health and wellness coach. Without it, like it could be any topic in the realm of health and wellness coaching. And I just thought, you know what, I'll just apply and see what it actually is about and go through the process. So applying was pretty easy. Like it's all, pretty much system driven. You put your details into a system. If you match the profile, it's an automated process where you get invited to do a couple of study modules. Then you sit a test with them to see if you meet their qualifications. Then you have a mock coaching session with one of their care coaches. And then you either get a job or you don't. And during all the modules, during the onboarding process or during even the application process, you sort of learned how their platform works. And it's pretty simple. Like you have your own calendar structure. So you open up the days or hours that you want to work. Ideally, they do ask to have at least, I think these days it's at least 10 hours a week, ideally at least 20 hours a week. And then you set up your own coaching profile. And if anyone who has the access to be coached by BetterUp coaches goes online for the first time, they do a little questionnaire that then matches them with a pool of coaches. So they get matched with 10 coaches and they then can choose which of these 10 coaches they would like to work with. Obviously, part of that is based on availability calendar-wise. So depending on what time zones people are in, there are a lot more coaches in the US than here in Australia, New Zealand. So it's a lot easier to get matches if you're a coach down here because there aren't that many working in our time zone. But yeah, once you match with them, you've pretty much got a full-on interface that's super simple to use. You see your booking calendar, ties in with any of your other calendars, so that's pretty straightforward. You've got the profile of the individual clients. You can see any of the questionnaires they may have done. You've got a resource library, so you can assign them homework. You can upload your own files to assign to them or use the BetterUp ones. Pretty much access to any sort of magazine subscription in the world to send them articles from. And at the same time, a messaging function that makes it super easy. The sessions are half-hour sessions. They can be booked like in advance as a recurring one or just as one-offs. Invoicing, super simple. So any session that you, by the end of the session, you pretty much complete it, take your notes, record it. It already gets sent to the invoicing software. So you do need an ABN number or you do need to have a company that you contract through. But once a month, you just make sure that all the invoices are correct and you get paid into your account without having to do any invoicing yourself. It's all done automatically. So it's a very, very simple process that I'd recommend, like anyone who either wants to get into remote coaching or sort of wants to start running their own business but doesn't have any business experience. It's a very simple way to get used to running your own business without having to do the accounting side and seeing, is that actually something you want to do? Like, do you want to work remotely? Do you want to work face-to-face online? And yeah, it's good. So yeah, like, as I said before, I like variety. So I only open my calendar certain days a week and only at certain times. So I have clear separation between those days I'm in the clinic. On those days, these times I work for BetterUp, these times I work for myself. So I can structure it around my own training and around my own sports. So yeah, it works really well for me.
That sounds really well put together. It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into how you want to run your weeks. You're not just at the whim of the people around you. You structured your life in a way that suits your needs.
Yeah, and that didn't happen straight away. Like there was a lot of trial and error involved. But yeah, like I'm a person, I love starting super early in the morning, but then finishing early in the afternoon. That means I've got the whole afternoon and evening to do my own things. And both with my own clients locally that are up super early usually, as well as it works with the different time zones overseas as well. So I'm not just with BetterUp looking at Australia, New Zealand clients, but people from other countries or other time zones have the chance to book into, and yeah, it works. And I still get that personal contact while working in a clinic with other people. So it took me a while to like find a good mix, but really happy with how it's worked out.
I've got a couple more questions, Annie. One is, what's it like working with people from different countries? You know, there are cultural differences and terminology. I know you've come from Europe and you've settled in Australia, so you've had probably some experience with that. But what's it like in terms of coaching?
I think in terms of coaching, it's amazing because like I lived in a lot of different countries. I've worked with a lot of different cultures, and with coaching now that just translates. So for me personally, it doesn't matter if someone's Japanese and calling from Japan, or if someone's from Canada, or if someone's a German expat living in New Zealand. It doesn't really matter because I find it quite easy to build rapport with people from all different types of cultures. It's definitely amazing to see difference in cultures though. Like certain countries, if you've got clients from those countries and they come up with this is what I'm going to do for the next week or the next fortnight, they have just this inherent discipline that it will be done. No questions asked. They've planned it out and that's what it is. And it's very sort of structured. Whereas you've got people from other cultures who are like, yeah, they commit to certain goals and then they come back the next week and they go, I haven't done any of them, but I've done that, and that instead, and that kind of makes up for it. It's like, okay. And at the beginning, I always thought, oh, that's just people specific, but it's sort of like, yeah, it's crystallized that some cultures are very sort of direct and others are like, yeah, I'll just figure it out. But that just makes it fun because you really sort of like, you can't rely on that being the norm. Like you can't stereotype everyone. It's just like having it in the back of your mind going, okay, I'll have to handle this a bit differently. I have to word some things a bit differently. For me, like English isn't my first language. So like I do have an accent. So people notice straight away, like, you're not Australian. Like I'm matched with an Australian coach, but you're not Australian. It's like, yep. And then a lot of the people, especially through BetterUp, people who work for big companies all over the world. So a lot of them are expats, so they can instantly relate as well. They just go, oh yeah, so you know what it's like living abroad. Yes.
There's that relatability that helps to build the relationship.
The one thing I can say though, for anyone who studied coaching in English and learned how to coach in English and suddenly tries to coach in their native language, it's hard. It's really hard. I tried to coach in German, and I had a couple of German clients who are like, can we do German sessions? And to be fair, with most of them, we went back to English. So they're living overseas, they speak English every day. I speak English every day, and we just really noticed that, yeah, if you haven't spoken your own language for a long time and you haven't studied something specifically in that language, it just really makes
you're trying to back translate, I can imagine. How would I say that? How would I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. You're in flow, but then one word is missing and you're completely out of flow.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And back to the drawing board.
I think that was the biggest part I was a bit more hesitant about, was when I suddenly had a lot of German clients match with me and I'm like, how am I going to do that? Help. And I feel like just as happy as me to just keep it in English. So yeah.
And one last question I have is that you mentioned half-hour sessions with BetterUp. How does that work? Do they give you a session outline of things that you need to cover off, or do you come up with your own session plan? How does that work?
So that's completely up to you as a coach. You literally run it as your own business. So pretty much when you have your first session with the client, you figure out what do they want to work on, what are the main things. BetterUp has different surveys, so you usually have a bit of an idea of what their mental state is like. You know whether they're currently whether there are areas they already try to focus on. It's just, a very brief survey that's being filled in. So you have a background idea, but other than that, you just, do it the same way you would do it with any of your own clients. You just, discover what is their vision. You work with them on what they want to achieve. A lot of them are unlimited programs. So, it's not set to like 3 months or 6 months. That's just their employer pays for it. So like you've got people who come direct and pay direct, but most of the clients are pretty much paid for by the employer. So you really start off with a visioning exercise, and that sometimes takes 2 sessions because half an hour is not a lot. And then you start working on, okay, how are we breaking that down into goals? And then you run it as your own business pretty much. Like BetterUp has resources that you can use and assign, and like information about all different topics. But if you've got your own worksheets that you'd like to use, you just upload them as a PDF, send them via Messenger. Like, you don't have to use the BetterUp resources if you're more confident using your own. So, yeah.
It sounds like it's very flexible and allows you to have that flexibility in the way you work.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks for the chat today, Annie. I'm curious to know if you have any insights, anything that you've learned about yourself in the past couple of years going through this process.
Many. I think one of the biggest insights was I don't do well working by myself all the time. I'm an extrovert, and even though you're with clients most of the day, it's very different to having a team around you where you can just quickly have a little run through, just have a cup of tea together and just brainstorm ideas. If you've got a client who's a bit more challenging, if you've got someone around you, you can just have a chat with and go, how am I going to handle that? Like, have you got any ideas? Or just go for lunch together and like have a good time. So I've got luckily a lot of friends who work remotely or from home as well. So even on those days, I now got sort of a group of people I can do things with and get my little extroverted energy fix. Yeah, like 7 days or like 5 days working from home by myself was not good for me. The other thing I learned as well is I think I'm still a big fan of like having a certain niche that you work with, especially when you're starting out. But for me to make coaching what I live off full time, like I don't have any other, like I live off coaching full time now, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd say that 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think in that regard, like I'm pretty happy for me personally to have those different niches. They're all very different. They're a little, but it just, yeah, keeps me on my toes. So I have to keep thinking and I don't get stuck in a rut as well. So I definitely need that to not get.
And one other thing I'm just thinking about as you're talking is that in terms of the marketing, by being engaged with BetterUp, you don't have to do any marketing. By being as part of the Integrative Clinic, you don't have to do any marketing. And so the area where you are niche focused is in your own business where you are doing marketing. And I'm imagining that's largely through your networks and word of mouth, is it?
So marketing these days, like I tried all the different social media, different ads, but in the end, that was fun, but it was also sort of like I was spending way too much on something that wasn't bringing me returns. Just word of mouth. A lot of times now it's that, let's say I've got someone through BetterUp and they've got someone who isn't part of a program where they can either sign up directly to BetterUp or the employer pays. They just like, is there a way for them to get in touch with you? So that's how I get some clients. Others find me, through word of mouth because I've had friends or family of them who worked with me previously. I'm probably, now that I've got my pain management certification, I'm really interested in that. That's not something I'm known for. Like injury, yes, chronic pain, no. So I'll definitely have to look into, okay, how am I going to market that and how am I going to get word out that that's something that I'm doing, because it's something I'm super passionate about. But I actually haven't thought that far yet. I'm just like, I've got to like sort of figure out how I'm going to for those services, whether it's going to be group support, support groups, whether it's going to be one-on-one coaching, whether it's going into different clinics again, or even with the clinic that I work with and starting it as a program there. So there are just so many different options that I really have to look into. Okay, how am I going to do that? And how will I market it? But BetterUp, they do it all for you. Within the clinic, like we brainstorm marketing ideas as a team, and we have regular catch-ups with marketing, but it's not something that I have to do. But it's fun. With my own business, it works pretty well with word of mouth at the moment. And it just works.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Annie. I really appreciate you fitting us in amongst your coaching clients.
Easy. I've got another one in 10 minutes, so that worked perfectly.
We'll let you go and get on. I'll say goodbye for now and I'll just stop the recording and we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds brilliant.
Thank you. See you next time.
See ya.